The Oklahoma State Cowboys only go 10 deep at CB, yet they will still lead the Big 12 in INTs.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you, Kai, for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at AllDayOState. Today, we're partially brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app today. Do not miss out on the action. Create an account and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Make sure you go do that today. Meanwhile, we get started on the defensive side of the ball. Not just the defensive side of the ball, but the side of the ball that seems to be numerically the lowest for Oklahoma State coming into the season. The Cowboys currently only have 10 cornerbacks on the official media guide roster. All of those are going to be led by Korie Black, the senior, or should I say fifth-year senior out of Waco, Texas, coming in at 6 foot, 190 pounds. Korie's been a guy who played a significant amount as a freshman very early on. And then he was kind of a dude that got into a lot of ticky-tack foul situations. But recently, he has been elevated to the dude. Not that he wasn't the dude last season, but even last season being the guy. I don't know that he was the physical force or the vocal leader that he could have been. I think this season we do get to see a little bit of an emergence out of Korie Black. This should be the time. 5 years into the system, 5 years at this level, 5 years of body by glass. This should be Korie Black's season. And as he's leading this squad, I think a lot of us are very high still on Cam Smith. Cam Smith is an individual on the other side of the ball that we relied on last season, but at 6 foot, 195 pounds, the junior did have some help last season. And that help came by the way of Kale Smith, 6 foot, 175 pounder out of Midwest City, Oklahoma. He's another cat that, as you've noticed throughout the course of the season last year, he got more and more playing time as the season went on. I think Cam Smith, his ability to transition from the offensive side of the ball in high school to where he's at now should be able to provide him much more opportunity. But the competition he's getting from Kale Smith cannot be understated. Just like the size of R.J. Lester coming in at 6'3", 185 pounds by way of Fort Smith, Arkansas. He's been out here busting heads. According to some of the running backs, this dude loves to come downhill and have a lot of fun in the box. So if he's the guy that's asked to blitz, R.J. Lester raises his hand and says, "Can I get it done, coach?" A mainstay, a long-time guy who's just been part of this maturation process on behalf of a guy like Korie Black is going to be Deshaun Buckner. Deshaun Buckner is a fourth-year senior, 6 foot, 200 pounds out of Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Deshaun Buckner, still being a Cowboy, I think speaks volumes to him and his character and how his development at Oklahoma State has allowed him to fall in love with not only the university, but the process and the way in which we do it. Last season, Kenneth Harris didn't see the field as much that I think most of us thought he would, coming over from Arkansas State and bringing a very, very good pedigree with him at 6 foot, 195 pounds. This redshirt junior's another dude who's been playing this level of collegiate ball for a long enough now to take that next step up. So if Kenneth Harris is going to be opposite of Cam Smith or Kale Smith, that competition is exactly what we need. And we have more competition into Kelvin Beeman. Kelvin Beeman, 6'1", 205 pound redshirt junior out of Shreveport, Louisiana, should be, much like Deshaun Buckner, able to kind of find his role this season. He's been here for a few years. He's been able to kind of orchestrate in multiple different systems, right? Coming back from the Jim Knowles system to then obviously last year in Bryan Nardo. What I think this year equals is a little bit of both, a little bit of Bryan Nardo, a little bit of Jim Knowles' system. If you're going just back to terminology alone, the Kelvin Beeman and Deshaun Buckner have seen every single transition that we've gone through in the recent years. Therefore, they should be crucial to explaining everything to the younger guys. One of those younger guys that I'm very excited about is 6'4", 195 pound freshman Jacoby Oliphant. Jacoby Oliphant comes by way of St. Louis University High School in the Missouri area. This is a dude that a long time ago, I think may have gotten overlooked even by Oklahoma State. But at that size, it's only a matter of time before he makes a transition at Oklahoma State. I think eventually he could be a safety, but this is his comfort spot. He's another one making a transition from playing on the offensive side of the ball that size-wise, body by glass, should get him in a position to add immediate depth, which is something that we absolutely need. One of the biggest late flips for this last class is freshman LaDainian Fields, number 28, 6 foot, 170 pounds. A lot of people thought he was going to go play wide receiver at the next level. It took a decent amount of convincing, I guess, on our behalf to get him to come to the defensive side of the ball. As we've just discussed before, Bryan Nardo is a whisperer in living rooms. You just got to get him there. Rounding out the cornerback room is going to be a redshirt sophomore from Ardmore, Oklahoma, and Evan Smith. So numerically speaking, 10 cornerbacks is not an ideal position to be in. But I think Oklahoma State knows good and daggone well that just like you might have a guy like Kendall Daniels who's big enough to play linebacker while playing safety, you have to look at some of the guys that we know do play both or have rotated in both, somebody like a Cam Epps. And I think Dylan Smith isn't completely out of the woodworks for doing a kind of a multi-role style system. I think Kobe Hilton, yes, he's a safety, but could he do a little bit of rolling? Absolutely. Then you look at somebody like a Reed Duquesne. Reed Duquesne has the pedigree, right, to get to linebacker size, but he's going to have enough speed to potentially, shave down a little bit. What is Lyric Rawls going to do? We know Trey Rucker looks faster. Cam Franklin continues to get bigger. Ty Williams has been one of those versatile guys that could do a little bit of both. We know Willie Nelson can do a little bit of both because he just did it. So although the cornerback room isn't the deepest on the roster, and athletically, they may not even necessarily be the best on the roster, but what they are is led by the right amount of senior leadership. DeKelvin Beeman has more than cut his teeth in this system. I think that this Nardo system and the Jim Knowles system, if you have the right emergence, should be massively beneficial for the cornerbacks. And here's my biggest point as to why I definitely believe that we will lead the Big 12 in the interception category. Well, it's because the run defense is going to be so absolutely ridiculous that it's going to force teams to throw the ball more than they want to, which means we're going to be able to have a lot of advantageous spots for our cornerback room to get in, which is why I expect them to lead the Big 12 in interceptions. Not necessarily because I think they're the greatest cornerback room since sliced bread, nor do I think they're the greatest cornerback room we've had even in recent memory. I compare a lot to 2021. From a cornerback room perspective on the defensive side of the ball, I don't know that I would throw these guys 100% in that group. But what I will say is just because of the other bodies on defense and the way that we're going to force teams to be a little bit more one-dimensional will equal more interceptions in the passing department by a group that is absolutely capable of not only leading the Big 12, but having a good shot at touching some of those 2021 numbers. Is it for sure going to happen? I don't know. But I do think that with this leadership all the way across the board, we're not going to be having the eye candy mistakes that we've had recently. Just my thoughts. Before we start talking about Mike Gundy versus the world, Oklahoma State versus the world, whatever it is, sign me up for it. Just like you should get signed up today with eBay Motors. Yeah, we already talked about it. The MVP of the day is always going to be eBay Motors. In order for you to be the MVP of anything, your rig has to get there first, which is why you got to go rock today with eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts to choose from, there's no question who your ride or die rig needs for you to stay alive. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's the parts guaranteed to fit your rig every time. Guaranteed or your money back. eBay Motors, the objective is to have you burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need, all the prices you want, it is very easy to turn your rig into the MVP today and bring home that W. Make sure you do that by keeping your ride or die rig alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Another thing that's available to all U.S. customers is the gift that keeps on giving, and that gift is Mike Gundy. We recently discussed how Mike Gundy's definitely not an obstacle for the Big 12, even though some people have tried to present that the Big 12 has a Mike Gundy problem. Well, not only does the Mike Gundy not have a Big 12 problem, but Mike Gundy also is the blueprint for how you deal with certain situations. One of those situations most recently discussed was Georgia. Georgia has a plethora of individuals that have had some off-field issues, including driving under some adverse situations, so on and so forth. And recently, Kirby Smart, after a couple more of his Georgia Bulldogs were arrested, he did come out and he said that nobody really knows how to handle this, right? All teams, all coaches, all across the country doesn't really have their finger on how to get these young men to stop making these level of mistakes. Well, Mike Gundy has put forth a blueprint for a lot of these universities and a lot of these coaches on how to handle these situations. Historically, he's been very, very quick to kick people off the team. But as the times have gone on, he understands the totality of the situation pertaining to Ollie Gordon. So other coaches in the country, much like Kirby Smart, can get the talent, but what cost does it come with? If you get all the most talented players in the country, but you know that a decent portion of them may have some underlying issues or background problems that could pop their ugly heads back up again in college, how to avoid those scenarios. And then once you do find yourself in those situations, how to mitigate the risks. Well, Mike Gundy is a perfect example of how you orchestrate the culture within your locker room to prevent a lot of these things from occurring, or at least prevent a lot of these things becoming cancerous and continuing to occur, but also taking them with different angles of perspective, which is why the Ollie Gordon decision did make a lot of sense, which is why there's people like myself that decided to back Mike Gundy on this decision, because we know historically he doesn't typically make this move. But as Mike Gundy is taking some flack for the way he's handled the Ollie Gordon situation, we have to consider what Mike Gundy's role would be in a new Big 12 with the additions of some of the ACC schools. And as we covered on the show Friday, he's not an issue. If anything, the Big 12 is reaching out to Mike Gundy saying, thank you very much, very much. We will allow you to continue to say some of the things you're saying because it's honest. It's truthful. Is it a little too upfront? Is it a little bit too abrasive? Possibly. But what's good for the goose is good for the gander. What's good for Brett Yormark's good for the Big 12. And if the Big 12 is eating, we should have the capability of eating more very soon. But if the ACC schools do, in fact, find their way to the Big 12, at the end of the day, as much as I've said that I would love Florida State and Clemson to get here, I've also said 18 months ago I didn't think that was a realistic possibility. What I did see more of a realistic possibility was your Pitts, right? Your Louisvilles, your NC States. Those schools inevitably ending up at the Big 12. If it were to happen that Florida State and Clemson were to make their way in the Big 12, where does Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy fit? Because if Kyle Whittingham is retiring and he's already doing the coach in waiting, that means next year Mike Gundy is like the official old head of the crew. So where does he stack up? Well, in the new Big 12, if Kyle Whittingham was going to be coaching for a long time, then clearly he's going to have some competition as far as the wins department goes. Now, when it comes to just like up-and-comers, people who you got to pay attention to in the recruiting realm, maybe you could say Lance Leipold, maybe you could say Chris Kleiman, but they still don't quite compare to where Mike Gundy has been at his time in the Big 12. So if you look at Mike Norvell, where does he stack up against the Mike Gundy? If Florida State and the Seminoles were to bring their talents to the Big 12, would you rank Mike Norvell above Mike Gundy? Historically, you can't do that. And neither of them have made a CFP. You could argue that Florida State maybe should have. Bro, really? Stop. Technical difficulty. Apparently, my dog didn't think I needed the lighting kit. Anywho, as Mike Gundy is compared to Florida State, historically, he's going to be able to provide a lot more juice than Mike Norvell. And then if you look a little bit deeper, if it's going to be Clemson, would that not be the most ideal situation for Brett Yormark? If Kyle Whittingham is leaving, retiring, then that's a big name that you no longer have in the Big 12 Conference. Well, if you were to bring in Dabo Swinney, who thinks a lot like Mike Gundy, who recently was saying some of the same things in regards to the NIL and transfer portal as Dabo Swinney in Mike Gundy, that's a story that sells itself. That's a matchup that sells itself. I'm not even just talking about what Clemson would provide or what Florida State would provide. I'm talking about what Mike Gundy would provide, just in the namesake for Brett Yormark in the Big 12 moving forward. And as it pertains to Oklahoma State, Oklahoma State has made 2 of the last 3 conference titles. Florida State was riding some epic highs last season. Unfortunately, the committee let their thoughts be known on the ACC, which, in my opinion, was another ember to the beginning of the end of the conference, or at least the conference as we know it. But if Florida State or even Miami, Clemson, Louisville, Virginia Tech, NC State, if any of those number of schools join the Big 12, would Oklahoma State not still be ahead of them? I mean, maybe not when it comes to, the old school, because old school, Florida State makes a lot of sense. But old school doesn't equal recruiting. Recruiting, unfortunately, is about eyeballs. And in this new world of getting the most amount of eyeballs, Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State provide a lot that some of these schools don't. Now, from a TV viewership, those kind of eyeballs, we absolutely would love Florida State and Clemson. But at the end of the day, I think that we still end up with, 4 ACC schools. I don't necessarily think it's going to be Florida State and Clemson. But even if it were, Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State still carry a big enough stick that the new guys in the ACC, whomever they may be, are going to be, to some degree, looking up to Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State. And that's something that neither OU nor Texas could ever, stomach. But this changing of the times was already in order for Texas. And Oklahoma is not going to win the SEC, just like they haven't won the Big 12 for a while now. So you should all take some solace in the fact, we should all take solace in the fact that in Big 12 country, and Oklahoma State specifically, we have a guy, we have a team, and we have a product that will be comparable to whomever the ACC has come available, if that, in fact, does come to fruition. As Tyffany Bias and our main man, Brandon Weeden, have got some new realizations as well. So Brett Yormark would be wise to continue to utilize Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State to his fullest benefit. Another visionary thing that Brett Yormark's been able to do is put together the very first ever Big 12 Council, which will have 2 former student athletes representing every team in the Big 12 to do a multitude of things as we all enter this new 16-team chapter of Big 12 time. And the 2 representatives for Oklahoma State are going to be the main man, Brandon Weeden, and a cowgirl who made her name in the NBA after burying threes all day in GIA, Tyffany Bias, who's also now referred to Tyffany Bias Patmon. Congratulations, Tyffany, and congratulations, Brandon Weeden. This is yet another thing that Brett Yormark's been able to do that kind of separates the Big 12 from some of the other conferences. We know that the Big 10 and the SEC have been envious of Brett Yormark for making some of the decisions, like the WWE stuff for the Big 12 title game. Having the Nelly concert there was obviously a big deal. The way he's doing the Big 12 media days is something that's been talked about. The way that he's viewing the monetary gains from outsourcing different portions of the conference, aka 20%, to private equity, the sponsorship brands. There's a large portion of things that Brett Yormark has been able to provide that the Big 12 has never had before. And now we get this, this news of Brandon Weeden and Tyffany Bias joining this council. What exactly they'll be doing, I don't know that we all exactly know, but we do know this is going to be huge. This is going to be very beneficial for the Big 12 and Brett Yormark as they continue to lean on guys like Mike Gundy. Might as well throw in the main man, Brett Weeden, into the mix as well. This is just another domino for Brett Yormark and the Big 12, proving why there's going to be longevity in this league. If we don't end up with the two major division split, which unfortunately I do think is still a possibility, or we're still possibly leaning that way. But until that time, or when that time comes, Brett Yormark is proving once again that he's at the forefront of doing some innovative things that are going to help the conference continue its ascension to eventually maybe catching some of what the Big Ten are doing and the SEC are doing. We've got a long ways to go, of course, but Brett Yormark is a dude that's helping us get there. Just like the New York Mets are all giving us reasons to be pumped up. Last season, if you do recall, they drafted the two-way star out of Stillwater, Oklahoma State, Nolan McLean, who was a guy who could launch bombs. He could play some small ball. He could also give you an under 2.0 ERA on the mound. Well, Carson Bench is the same, and he's ironically going to the same place. So the New York Mets are obviously trying to cook something up here. You get back-to-back two-way stars from Oklahoma State. This idea that he won't be a pitcher in major leagues, I don't necessarily agree with it. And I think the Mets will find exactly what they need out of it. Because clearly they're looking for something specific here. And specifically, they're looking for two-way guys. Shohei Ohtani has, of course, made this a very appealing thing to have at your disposal. Whenever they drafted Nolan McLean, this was the direction that they're invested in. Well, they doubled down on it by grabbing the other two-way Cowboy and Carson Bench. So what does this mean for the Mets? Who knows? But what it does mean for Oklahoma State is we're going to continue to have this level of guy drafted. Next season, the Cowboys should have yet another first-round draft pick. And we'll see. We'll see. A guy that should have gone to Michigan, and Nolan Schubert, ended up a Cowboy, could end up being another first-round draft pick in an Oklahoma State jersey. I cannot wait for it. All righty, y'all. I reckon that's all we're going to have for this one, Arise Show. As always, I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. And thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State. Like it if you like the daggone thing. Dislike it if you don't. That's okay, too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. My podcast and people out there. You're the bread, the butter, the bricks, the foundation. Do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave a review. That's all. Later, taters.